Hey everyone, and welcome to the first official episode of Gaming While Bearded. My name is Daniel. Today we're going to take a look at a game review for Museum. This was a Kickstarter game published by Holy Grail Games. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to butcher the designers' names here, but by Eric Dubois and Olivier Mellison, and it was illustrated by Vincent Dutray. So I just got to say the artwork in this is fantastic. It's something that I've never looked at in a board game before as far as art goes. But whenever I saw this on Kickstarter, it was something that really kind of drew me in, and it really brings the theme of the game out. So let's get it to the table, see exactly how it plays, and then we'll meet up at the end for final thoughts. All right, everyone, so here we have a two-player game of Museum set up. I apologize for the lighting at the top of the table, but I just wanted to kind of show you how much space this game takes up. Just for being mostly a card game, it does take up a lot of space on the table. The base game goes up to 4 players. There is an expansion that takes it up to 5. So overall, space on this table is going to be rather limited. What we want to do first is just take a look at some of the components of the game, see how they work, see what the different cards are going to do before we go into kind of a turn-by-turn example. So the first thing is, let's take a look at one of the player boards. So this is an example of one of the player boards. This is the Grand Museum of Paris. So we can take a look here. The highlighted area there in yellow is going to be what we're going to call the Grand Gallery. Now, the Grand Gallery is worth extra points at the end of the game if you can fill the entire area with a particular civilization or a domain. So we go over here to the left side of the player mat, and you'll see that if you're able to fill the Grand Gallery, you get an extra 10 points at the end of the game. If you can fill the entire museum, it's 12 points. And if you can do both of those, you will get 25 points at the end of the game. On the back of each museum mat, there is a more advanced side as well. So on this one right here, the Gallery of Madrid, you'll see the Grand Gallery looks a little different. There are actually more spaces for additional artifacts, so it's more difficult to fill your museum. And you can see that you'll get 8, 14, or 25 points at the end of the game if you are able to fulfill the necessary criteria. Up next, we want to look at the actual artifact cards. This is really where the meat is of the game. So throughout Museum, you're going to be exploring 4 different areas of the globe, and this is going to be indicated by those decks there at the top of the table. So from left to right, we have the America Pacific, Europe, Middle East, and then Asia as far as the parts of the world we'll be exploring and where we'll be gathering those artifacts from. So let's take a look at the artifacts themselves. Here are just a couple of quick examples. And we'll go over some of the icons on the cards as well, just for reference. So this card is Machu Picchu, as indicated by the title here. In the top left-hand corner, you're going to have the cost of the card. That is how much it costs you to put it into your museum. A level 5 card is the highest value card in the base game. It's considered a masterpiece. And a masterpiece will give you a prestige point as soon as you place it into your museum. We'll go over prestige points later. The icon in the top right-hand corner is the domain of that particular card. So whereas civilizations are only found in certain parts of the world, like the Inca civilization cards can only be found in the America Pacific deck, the domains of these cards can be found throughout the world. So this domain is for architecture. We'll look at a few more here in a little bit. And domains are a little, in my opinion, a little more difficult to kind of collect because you're collecting the same icon from across the world. And you cannot have multiple cards from the same civilization, like this is the Inca civilization, in the same domain. So you can't have 2 Inca architectural cards and count them towards the same domain. Only 1 card from that civilization will count towards end of game scoring. So let's take a look at some of the other cards here. And I'm not going to try to pronounce all of these because I don't want to butcher any names. But this card right here from the Polynesian civilization cost you 1 to put in your museum, is part of the navigation domain, has some flavor text down here at the bottom to kind of tell you what you're looking at. Okay. Here we have a painting of Rama going into battle from the Indian civilization. This is going to cost you 3 to put into your museum and is part of the warfare domain. The model of a shrine is from the Phoenician civilization. It costs you 1 to go into your museum and is part of the theology domain. This loom from the Celtic or Celtic civilization, however you pronounce it, is going to be a cost of 4 and is part of the agricultural domain. The Pyramid of the Magician, Uxmal, is part of the Maya civilization, cost of 3, and is part of the architecture domain. So that's just a few of the base cards you'll be seeing. Now let's take a look at one of the bad cards. This card is called Public Opinion. Public Opinion is going to show up on the board throughout the game, and it's a negative card. Basically, it means that the world is feeling that we're pulling artifacts from various areas and we're keeping certain ones in our warehouses versus actually displaying them in our museum. We'll talk a little bit about how the warehouse works later. But what it means is that you have to take one of these public opinion tokens and you're going to place it in the area that the card was drawn from. And each one of these tokens will be worth negative points at the end of the game based on how many tokens are in that region and how many cards are in your warehouse. Next, we're going to take a look at favor cards. So favor cards are found right in the middle of the board. They have this purple background with an M on it. Favor cards are, I don't want to really say that they're variable player powers, but they give you a bonus that really only you can use. You can play one favor card per turn, and you get a new favor card for every 10 points that you score during the game. So let's take a look at an example of 2 of these cards really quick. The first one here is called the New Archaeological Team. And what this allows you to do is, at the beginning of your exploration phase, which is where you're going to be selecting cards from the board, you can choose any one of the continents, take the 2 cards that are there, put them on the bottom of the deck, draw 4 new cards, and pick the 2 new ones that you want to place out on the board. The other 2 cards that you drew will go to the bottom of the deck. Really unique because it allows you to get through the deck faster to get to certain civilizations or domains from that particular continent. The next one we're going to look at is called the Private Collector. The Private Collector allows you to choose an object card from your personal reserve, which is known as your hand, and you permanently remove it from play. Then you take the number of prestige points as the card's value, plus 1. A great way to get prestige points quickly. We haven't discussed prestige points yet, but they're used as a currency in the game, and they are also used at the end of the game as victory points if you have any left over. Next, we're going to take a look at the headline cards. Headline cards are more like world events. You don't draw one during the first turn, so everyone will get at least 1 full turn before headline cards start showing up. And then at the start of the first player's turn, after that, you will be drawing a headline card. These can be good, they can be bad, but they really affect gameplay throughout the game. They are also going to add in some new tokens based on what the card says. So let's take a look at the first one here. The first card says that there is instability in Africa, okay? So it gives you a quick flavor text as far as what is going on. And then it says the object cards in Africa and the Middle East are reduced by 1. At the start of every turn, you're going to flip cards up, or you'll flip 2 cards from every continent. Unfortunately, this headline means that we are going to have -1 cards that we can actually choose from. So what that means is that we'll take the card that is closest to the center of the board. That card is going to be considered out for the remainder of the turn. And then after that turn's over, we'll draw a new headline card. This token will go away and that continent will go back to operating as normal. There are also ones where they will add new tokens or add cards to the to certain continents as well. So not all headlines are bad, but they will affect certain continents and areas of the board. Next, we're going to take a look at one called America at War. So this talks about how a certain area is just at war, totally unavailable, and it is going to be closed for the remainder of the turn. So in this case, no one will be able to select artifacts or cards from the America Pacific region. So this token will get tossed on the cards that are there, and you will not be able to select those cards until the next turn and a new headline card is drawn. Once again, I know I only showed some negative cards here, but some have positive effects. Some will affect your experts, make them cheaper or more expensive, but it really does impact the game and your strategy. Next, we're going to look at our patron cards. Patrons are going to be individuals that are kind of funding your museum, and you really want to put into the museum what they're funding you to put in there, because it's going to give you extra points at the end of the game. Patron cards are yellow with an M logo on them. Each player will be dealt 3 of these at the start of the game. They will choose one, discard the rest, and keep it secret from the rest of the players, because that way no one knows what you're trying to collect to get your extra points at the end of the game. It's going to be kind of how you strategize. So let's take a look at 6 of these cards and just kind of describe what they mean. So this Greek Legacy card means that you will score a certain number of points based on the number of Greek civilization cards you have collected that are on display in your museum. This card says for 5 cards, you'll get 10 points. If you have 8 cards, you will get 16 points. Or if you have 11 or more cards, you will get 28 points. That's a really big difference maker at the end of the game if you can get all 28. The Fountain of Knowledge, this patron wants you to collect domains from throughout the world. If you are able to get a collection of 5 cards in one domain, you get 6 points. If you can get 2 different domains of 5 cards or more, you'll get 13 points. And if you can complete all 3, you will get 21 points. The perfect team means that if you hire experts during the game, we haven't discussed experts, but we will shortly, but you will get 5 victory points for every expert that you have hired at the end of the game. Quintessential collections means that for every collection you have, that you have a perfect set value card of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in your museum, you will get an additional 10 points. The Asia patron basically wants you to collect cards from Asia. So if you have 6 cards from that continent at the end of the game on display in your museum, you'll get 9 points, 16 for 10, and 22 for 14. Lastly, here we have the Masterpiece collection, or patron. They want you to collect masterpieces. The more masterpieces you have, the more victory points that you are going to get at the end of the game. There are a lot of these cards in the base game, and the rulebook does a fantastic job of explaining each one in detail. So after reviewing the patron cards, let's take a look at the expert cards, because we brought those up previously. So your expert cards have a dark backing to them. The expert board is found in this setup all the way on the right side of the table here. And your experts give you certain advantages throughout the game. You can pay for experts by discarding cards from your hand into your warehouse, which we'll talk about that when we get into gameplay. Or you can purchase them with prestige points or a combination of cards and prestige points. So let's take a look at some of the experts here. The cost is right here in this red circle, so this expert will cost you a total of 4. And the icon here, if you remember from earlier, is from the architectural domain, meaning that this expert will add 1 to your architectural domain for endgame scoring, okay? This is the way that you're going to be able to bump up 1 point and get some extra points. Arcadian Wells here is also cost of 4, and when you recruit him, the character copies the effect of another expert present in any museum, so pretty cool there. Okay. Nina Hopper here is also cost of 4. This allows you to draw 1 additional card from the America Pacific region whenever you select a card from that area. So she's going to be able to get you more cards from that location, which can really help if that's going to help you get points at the end of the game based on your bonus scoring. And last, before we get into our play-by-play going through turns, let's take a look at the actual scoring of the game. We know that we're going to score points based on the cards that go in our museum. Whenever we pay a cost to go into our museum, we will actually obtain that many victory points. So if we play a cost 5 card, we will get 5 victory points as soon as that card goes into our museum. At the end of the game, you're going to be going through your victory points table here, and you will gain points based on civilizations and domains. So here, you have the number of cards per civilization and the number of victory points that you'll receive for having those in your museum. You can see if you have 16 cards from the same civilization, you'll get 85 points at the end of the game. At the bottom, it gives you your domain collection points. Like I said, you can really only get 6 in a particular domain without an expert. So if you want to get the full amount, you're going to need to hire an expert throughout the game. Remember, domains are tricky because you cannot have the same civilization more than once in a particular domain. So if you want to score domains, you're going to have to collect from different civilizations to really make that work. But cards in the same domain from the same civilization will still count towards civilization scoring. So now we're going to take a look at some turns throughout the game so we can really understand and get a handle on the mechanics. We'll be referencing this card throughout. This is just your player reference card. It shows what you can do on your main turn, which you'll be taking one object card and then furbishing your museum or taking an inventory. And then the optional at the bottom is you can play a favor card. Remember, you can only play one favor card per turn. So we're going to reference this card as we go just to give you an example of how the game plays. So let's get down to the table and see exactly how we do it. All right, so let's see what a normal turn would look like. We're going to play through a few of these, and then we're going to fast forward to the end of the game and then take a look at scoring at the end. So your hands will consist of one favor card and then one card from each area of the regions that you'll be exploring, and that composes of your main deck. Now, when I look through these cards, I start to notice a pattern. It looks like I've got an architectural domain kind of started in my hand already. And then my favorite card allows me to pull an object card, which is an artifact, whose value is between 1 and 4 from any discard pile and place it into my museum for free. So it's a pretty powerful card there. So as the main player, I am allowed to select any card from the main board or any artifact and then add it to my hand at no cost. So what I'm going to do is, I know it's a little difficult to see all the cards on the board right now, but I'm going to select the one here all the way on the left side of the board to add to my hand. This is a 5-point card. Okay, it is a masterpiece, part of a warfare dominion or domain, and I'm just going to add that right into my hand. And at that point, I will allow the other players to take cards if they would like. So yes, every other player is going to be allowed to collect cards on my turn. So they can choose from any of the remaining cards if they so wish. Now, there is a cost with this. So say if the player to my right decides to take a card, and we'll say that they decide to take this 5-point masterpiece right up here, okay? They're going to take this compass from the Chinese civilization. We're just going to add that to their hand. If they want to take that card, then I am allowed to take a prestige point from the main supply and add it to my side of the board. So remember, prestige points are actually victory points at the end of the game, but they can also be used as currency. So for every player that takes a card on my turn, I get a prestige point. And the same thing for them if I take cards on their turn. So we're going to add that right down here for safekeeping. And now we're going to start playing cards into our museum. So I just took that 5-point card here, and I don't really want to play that right now, even though it's a high point card. I want to go ahead and start my collection here for the domain that I've already got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 5-point card from my hand, and I'm going to play it face up right over here beside the board. That is my discard, my warehouse, my reserve, whatever you'd like to call it. And then, because it's a 5-point card, I can play up to 5 points worth of cards into my museum. So I'm going to play these two right here. I'm going to play the Karnak Temple, and I'm going to play the Great Wild Goose Pagoda down into my museum. So in order to do that, I just add them right in. And there I have started my museum. I know that might be a little difficult to see, but now I've started my museum. So I just added 5 points to my museum, which means that I'm going to be allowed to move 5 points on the victory track. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm now halfway to collecting my next favor card as well. Because remember, for every 10 points you get, you're going to get a new favor card. So we'll come back after the next player's turn and see what our next turn is going to bring us. And actually, one thing that I forgot to do before we're going to move forward to the next player's turn is that we have to go back and we have to refill the board. So we have to go in and replace all of the artifacts that we just collected. So we're going to be bringing out a new card from the America Pacific, and then we're going to be bringing out a new card from Asia as well. Now that we've reset, it's still technically the first turn of the game because I'm first player. So we're going to let player 2 take their turn, see exactly what happens, and then we'll come back for the start of turn number 2. All right, so player 2 has finished the first start of their turn. You'll notice that they have decided to play Stonehenge. They used the Great Wall for a cost of 5 to put out that masterpiece. Because they played a masterpiece, actually, they also received a prestige point just over there at the right side of your board, or the right side of the screen, because they played that masterpiece. Now, for me, I also decided to take a card. I decided to take the Athenian Trireme, sorry if I'm butchering that name, as well. And because I took that card during my opponent's turn, they are going to receive another prestige point from the main supply that's going to be added that they can use later. So now we're back to my turn. I am the main player, so we're going to refill the board with all the cards that were taken previously. So we're adding another card to the Europe continent space, and then another card from Asia as well. And oh no, we've got a public opinion coming out of Asia. What that means is that we have to add a public opinion token, which can be found just over here on the main board, right up here at the top. Oops, and I apologize. I need to make sure I move player number 2 as well. Give them their 5 points they just earned. I'm sure they'll be happy about that. But we're going to take the public opinion token that we just pulled from the main board, and that is going to go right over here as a reminder in the Asia area that those cards from Asia that are in our warehouse at the end of the game are going to be worth negative points. Now, the good thing is that right now I do not have any cards in my warehouse from Asia, but my opponent just put one from the Great Wall over there. So unless he gets that out of his warehouse, that'll be worth negative points at the end of the game. Now, the next thing we need to do is, since it's officially the start of turn 2, we've refilled the board, we need to draw our first headline card. So let's see what happens here. Patron in Africa. This says that object cards in Africa and the Middle East are increased by 1. So that's actually a good thing. That means that we're going to draw another card from Africa and the Middle East, and we're going to add that to the board that we can draw from this turn. So we're going to show that right here. That's just going to be here for this turn only until we draw a new headline card. So to start my turn now that I can go back and start selecting artifacts again, and remember I can use my cards and my prestige points to buy experts if I feel like I need to, we're going to take a look at the cards that are left in my hand. So as we go through here, remember, I'm trying right now to start a domain collection in architecture, and I still have one card here that I can play from my hand. So I need to go through and decide what is going to be best for me. And remember, domains count not just based on the card value, but from the civilizations that we're taking them from. So I have one card from the Mayan civilization in my hand, and I have another one here on the table, but that's not going to help me in my domain collection. And then there's another one over here from the Egyptian side, the Egyptian civilization, but I already have one of those cards in my museum right now. So maybe I want to start looking at some other artifacts that might help me in the future. So I also have this navigation domain here that I just drew. So let's go ahead and take another one of those navigation cards from Egypt, and maybe we'll start a second domain to see exactly how we're going to get some points at the end of the game. So now I have two of these cards in my hand that I can add to my museum later. So now it's the end of my turn. My opponent is now allowed to select a card. And hey, they got really excited whenever that extra card came out from Egypt, or from the Africa and the Middle East, and they were really excited about that, but they didn't get what they were looking for. And now they have decided to reach all the way across the table and select this cost level 3 card right here from the board to add to their hand, which is good news for me because now I might know a little bit about what they're trying to do, but it's also going to get me a prestige point, which is going to help me out towards the end of the game. Now let's go ahead and furnish our museums again. So now, once again, with the cards I have in play, I want to start getting these navigational domain cards out. So I'm going to use this Goonstrip Cauldron. I'm going to pay that. I'm going to put it right over here in my warehouse. Okay, so just over here so that I can play one of these level 4 cards from my hand. And I think I'm going to go ahead and play this one from the Greek civilization. So let's go ahead and put this right over here for right now. So we can keep everything separate. Now, keep in mind, when scoring at the end of the game, all of your collections, your civilization's domains need to be adjacent to each other or connected through some of these hallways. The nice thing about this game is that I can maneuver these and change my layout at any point. So I don't have to stick to something right now because I'll be able to move these cards around in the future. So that's going to do it for my turn right now. We're going to take a couple more turns as we go, and then we'll come back here in just a little bit and see how everything's shaping up. All right, so welcome back to the table. We just did an extra turn. Now, what is in my hand? We've already done our exploration phase. I've already added cards to my hand. Now I'm going to be furnishing my museum. The card that I just selected is this one right here, which is going to go with my domain that I've started right up here in navigation. So what I'm looking at is that I need to play that, but I really only have another number 4 card that I can use to put it out. So I'm going to go ahead and play that card that I just drew into my museum because that is going to give me points as well as add to my domain. But now that I've done that, I can play my charity ball card. And this allows me to take any object card, value between 1 and 4, from any discard and place it into my museum for free. So I've used this card, I'm going to lose it now, but now I can immediately take that card and move it right into my museum. And I'm starting to look pretty good on that navigation domain right now because I do have at least 3 in that domain, so that's going to net me at least 5 points at the end of the game already. And who knows, maybe my patron card down here might have something to do with domains as well. Alright, so that last card combo actually just moved me up the board as well, so it took me over my 10-point threshold. I now have 17 victory points on the table, and since I'm over 10, I get to draw a new favor card that I can use again on a future turn. So, Express Delivery. You may place 1 object card value between 1 and 4 from your personal reserve from my hand into my museum for free. That's awesome. That means it's kind of the exact same thing I just did, but it lets me play another card for free versus just playing the cost on it. So that's pretty cool. So let's go back through. We're going to let player 2 take their next turn. Just in case you're a little curious about what they're working on over there, we'll see if we can get everybody set up here so you can kind of see it. They still have that Stonehenge card in play, and then they took a couple of cards from a civilization, the Inca civilization as well, that they're working on. So they haven't put a lot of cards out, but they do have 2 masterpieces from Asia in their reserve right now, which I'm a little curious about how they're going to use those later. All right, everybody, so we're over here looking at the player 2 board right now. We just went through and made our selections off of the board for their turn. So now we're going to take a look at some of the hand stuff they're going to be doing. I'm not going to show you their actual hand of cards because Technically, I'm not supposed to know what they have. But what they're going to do is interesting this turn. So they're going to be playing a card from their reserve and moving it into their museum. So let's discuss how that happens. So instead of playing a card from your hand, you can actually take a card from your hand, like the Fortress of Dune Angus, and play it straight into your reserve. Whenever you do that, you can immediately take one of the cards from your reserve and place it into your museum, just like that. So what has this done for player number 2 at this point? Well, there's a public opinion token for Asia right now, so that's going to take away the points they would have lost at the end of the game, and it allows them to kind of move cards around. Now, the unique thing is that I'm allowed to buy cards from their personal reserve as well. The only difference is that if I wanted to do that from their pool of cards, I would have to pay them the cost into their reserve, and I'd have to give them a prestige point in order to get the card as well. So let's see how the rest of it's going to play out. But player 2 decided to do an exchange here, swap from their hand down to their personal reserve, and bring an extra card into play. So not a bad move. All right, so after seeing that exchange, we're going to be refilling the board here. It looked like the last card that we had, or the last headline card, added an extra card to Asia. So we're going to discard the one that is closest to the deck, so that we can create just our 2 cards there. And then we're going to refill what we just drew from the board. And oh my goodness, we have another public opinion card that just showed up. And this time it's going to put a public opinion card, our public opinion token, into Europe. So we have that there now as well. Also, we need to move our competitor up, needs to go up 5 points from just adding that masterpiece. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're going to get a new favor card that's going to be added to their hand. And since they just played a masterpiece, we didn't give them the prestige point that they earned as well. So we're going to add that for player number 2 into their reserve they can use later. So we've got the public opinion token. I'm sitting here now and I'm looking at my civilizations, and I realize, oh man, I do have a Europe card over there. If that's in there at the end of the game, I'm going to be losing some points. So I may need to pay attention to try to get that out. Now that all the cards are out, I can go through and I can start selecting new cards to pull in. So from my current hand, you can see I still can play a card for free from my hand thanks to my favorite card. As far as the domain collections that I'm working on, I do have another navigation card I can play, and I have a architectural card that I can play that's going to increase both of my domains that I'm running right now. So we'll probably look at trying to get those 2 cards on the table this round. But before we get started, we need to know what our new headline event's going to be, since I'm player 1, and it says Africa is at war. So objects are not available from Africa or the Middle East in this turn. So what we need to do is we need to grab our closed off token and slap that right down. So that way we know we cannot take cards from that location this turn. So that doesn't really affect me that much. There wasn't an area that I was planning on going to. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to come over here to the America Pacific, and I'm going to take this masterpiece card right over here because I've got a little bit of a plan that I want to use this card for. There's a card I see on the table that I definitely want to pay for, and I'm going to need something like this in order to do it. Now, my opponent over here is also looking at cards that they may want to take, and looking at their board, they have decided that they are going to go for this bronze shield right down here. They're going to add that to their hand, and they are going to give me a prestige token as well for their efforts. So thank you very much for that. Now, to start my turn, I am actually going to swap cards with my opponent. So I'm going to take this level 5 masterpiece that I just bought, and I'm going to give it to my opponent and put it in their reserve. I'm also going to have to pay them a prestige point because I'm going to be putting a artifact in my museum that's in their reserve. So I'm allowed to use their discard pile to do so, but it costs me a little bit in order to do it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this nice compass here that's going to match my navigation domain that I'm currently building. So since I did that, it is going to give me another 5 points added to the game board. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to get another favor card, which is called Press Conference. This says that I can gain 1 prestige point for each public opinion token on the board. At the end of the game, you choose 1 continent, and I may ignore any public opinion tokens on that continent during final scoring. So pretty cool, a way that I can ignore some of those negative things that could potentially happen. Now, right now, I've got 2 favor cards in my hand. The hand limit here is that I can only have 3 of these unless another card states otherwise. So when I get another card, that's going to be my hand max for these favor cards. So I may want to keep that in mind as we move forward. And that's going to be the end for this turn. So I hope this gives you an idea as to how the game is played. We didn't really use the expert board right now in this gameplay this playthrough, just because we wanted to give you an example of how the real game was going to work. I'm going to finish doing this kind of generic run through, and then I'll see you back here for final scoring. A few more rounds. We're not quite to end game scoring yet, but there's one more thing that I want to show you that you can do on your turn. We've seen how you draw cards from the main board. We've seen how you pay for cards, put things in your museum. We've seen that you can pay for cards in your common pool and put into your museum. We've seen that you can buy cards from your opponent's common pool and put those into your museum. But there's one more action that you can do. So you've noticed here on our turn cards that we're allowed to furbish our museum by taking cards from our hand or a common pool and playing them. We can recruit an expert, which we haven't done yet, or you can even do an inventory. This allows you to take all the cards from your common pool back into your hand up to a limit of 7 cards. So if you have more than 7 cards in your hand, you're going to have to discard 1. So what I'm actually going to do is perform that inventory. I've got 4 cards in my hand right now, so I'm going to take these 3 from my discard pile, and I'm going to add them into my main player hand here. All right, everybody, we have finished our playthrough for Museum. We've gone through a couple of turns just as examples, and now we're going to look at end of game scoring. So you can see where both of our character markers ended up. The blue player ended up right on 50, which is going to start end of game, or is the trigger for end of game, and green player right now is at 49 points. So let's take a look and see exactly how we did. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the scoring card. Scoring card can be found right on the back of the On Your Turn card. So we look at the score track. We're going to do collections based on civilizations, collections based on domains. Then we're going to score our patron card. We're going to do, is anybody fill their museum or their grand gallery? We're going to count prestige tokens, and then we're going to subtract out the public opinion. Okay, so for first, I've got 49 points as the green player. Next thing we're going to do is collections based on civilizations. And if you remember from the scoring track, this shows us how many cards in the civilization we need and how many points there are. So this is me and how I went through and kind of put together my museum. Now remember, I'm allowed to score this any way that I want. So I can move this around as needed in order to make sure I can maximize my point values. And one thing that I do see that I want to move is I want to move this Greek civilization card to be with the rest of my Greek cards that I have here to maximize my point values. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to flip-flop these 2 cards, and I'll be right back with you. All right, so we flip-flop some cards now, and now we're going to take a look and see exactly how we can score. So the first thing we know is that I have a big Greek civilization here. That's what we're going to count first. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards in my Greek civilization. And then if we look here at our main player card, or scoring card, it shows that a 6-card civilization will net 9 victory points at the end of the game. So my green player will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now, I need to look, do I have any other civilization cards that are next to each other? And the way that I've organized it, I do not. But realize, had I been able to go through and connect my 2 Chinese cards here to the compass that I have over here, that would have netted me an additional victory point. But since I missed it, oh well, I'm not going to go through and count those points up. I don't see any other civilizations on this board right now, so now we're going to take a look at the collections based on domains. Domains, of course, are going to be the indicators here in the top right-hand corner. You need at least 3 of them to be able to score points. Looking here, I have one domain of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So a 5-card domain is going to net me 11 points. The next thing we need to look at is, are any of those from the same civilization? And they're not. So that's going to get me 11 points. 1, 2, 3, 10, and 11. Not bad at all. Next thing we look at is going to be the next domain here of navigation. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now what I have to do is remember, only cards from different civilizations count. So even though I have 4 of these Greek navigation domain cards, only 1 counts towards the overall domain. So I actually only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And 6 cards within a domain will net me 17 victory points. 1, 2, 3, 16, and 17. Thank goodness I know how to count, because we're really moving up on this track right now. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our patron card, which my patron card that I had selected dealt with actually creating domains. And as we just counted, we know that I have 2 domains that each have 5 or more cards. So I will get an additional 13 points right now towards my final score. So 1, 2, 3, 13. So that's going to leave me with 99 points. Now we need to do some subtraction, because now we're going to look at the public opinion tokens. So we look at each area for public opinion. We see that there are 2 tokens in the America Pacific. There are 2 tokens in Europe. There are 2 tokens in Africa, Middle East. And there are 2 tokens in Asia. That means that every card in my warehouse or my reserve is going to be worth -2 points at the end of the game. 1 point for every token in the region. So that means these Europe cards right here are worth -2 points apiece, because there are 2 tokens in Europe right now, which is right here. These are from the supply. So that's 2, 4, and 6. The same thing for America, which is 8, and the same thing for the Africa, Middle East. So I am going to lose 10 points just for the public opinion card. So that's going to take me from 99 all the way back here to 89. So kind of hurt my score there a little bit. Now we're going to walk on over and we're going to see how player 2 did on their end of game scoring. So we're going to do the same thing. We have our scoring options here. Let me grab that victory points table card again so we can see and remember exactly what we're looking at. So the first thing we're doing is collections based on a civilization. So they have a few civilizations here. We can see that there's 4 cards here. 4 cards in a civilization is going to net 3 points. They have a 5-card civilization here, which is going to be 5 points, and a 5-point civilization here that is worth 5 points. Now, had they connected that one Celtic card to here, they would have had a 6-card civilization that would have netted them a few more, but they didn't do that at the time that we stated we were going to end scoring. So we have 2 5 cards and a 4-card civilization. So the 2 5 cards get us 5 points each. The 4 card gets us 3 points each. That's 13 points just from civilization. So let's start moving here. 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, and 13. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to count domains. So domains only count if they are from different civilizations, not the same, and they have to be adjacent to each other. So all of these war ones here only count because as one, because they're all from the same civilization. Same thing here and here. So we actually have a 3-card warfare domain. We have a 3-card culture domain, because those 3 are adjacent by those hallways. And it looks like that's all we're going to have. So we're going to have 2 domains with 3 cards each. And that's going to net us another 10 points to move forward. So coming back around the track, we're going to move from 63. We're going to jump down here to 73. All right, so let's look at our patron card now. This player was doing the quintessential collections, which means for every perfect collection, they get 10 points, and they were able to produce 2 of those. As you can see, the same civilization all the way 1 through 5. So that is an extra 20 points for this player. So we're going to move them from 73 all the way over to 93. Not bad at all. And then last but not least, we are going to look at the public opinion. And I noticed that if you all look at this too, you'll notice that the prestige tokens are actually before public opinion, but I like taking a look at them last because it really shows what a difference they can make in winning or losing a game. So let's take a look here. Remember, it's 2 points for card in this game, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to be losing 10 points for this player. So we're going to be moving back from 93 back to 83. Last but not least, we're going to count our prestige points for both players. So here you can see that I have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 for the green player. So we're going to go ahead and move those. So we're going to move 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's 106 points to end the game for the green player. And then over here, not quite as organized, we're going to see that we've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 points coming in for the blue player. So the blue player right now is on 83. So we're going to move 10, 20, 21, 22, and 23. Actually, sorry, I miscounted there. We got to move back 2 because there's only 21 points there, not 23. So the end of the game, the green player is going to win 106 to 104. A very close, very tight game as a whole. Nicely done to everyone. I hope this makes a little bit of a difference in your games of Museum. Hope that the turn base that we saw on the end of game scoring is going to make a difference in terms of how easy it is for you to learn how to play the game. And let's sit down and we'll take a look at my final thoughts. So what are my final thoughts on the game? Well, I took a couple days after filming the playthrough and the kind of basic review because I wanted to get the game to the table a few more times with some new players. Because I am biased towards this game. As I stated earlier, it was my first Kickstarter that I ever backed. I really wanted to like this game, and I do. For that fact, I mean, I backed Museum with all the expansions that could potentially come with it. So yeah, I'm a little biased towards this game, and it was also the reason I wanted to be the first review that I had ever done. So what are the perspectives of some of the new gamers that I played with? Well, one, the board is pretty busy. There's a lot going on. It's beautiful, but it's hard to dictate where everything is and exactly what you're doing all the time. The headline cards sometimes are a little difficult. They throw in some things that make the game a little more challenging. The experts aren't something that they really even looked at all. It just wasn't something that was there for part of the game. So I would recommend if you're going to play this game with new players that are not gamers, leave out the headline cards for your first playthrough and leave out the expert cards for your first playthrough as well. There will be some favor cards that you'll have to remove because you won't have the headline cards, but I think they'll enjoy it. They'll learn the mechanisms a little bit better, and then you can introduce them into later games. For regular gamers, I think you can throw everything in at once and it'll be just fine. Now, the base game is a little basic. I mean, it's just set collection. All you're doing is collecting sets of cards based on whatever patron you were able to get at the beginning of the game and trying to accumulate points. But even though it's basic, there's a lot more you can add into the game once you know how everything goes. For example, expansions. You have the Archaeologists, you have the World's Fair, you have the Black Market, and you're going to have the Cthulhu Relics, which the Cthulhu Relics is something that turns the game into more of a take-that style game, which is totally different than what you would expect right out of the base box. Not only that, you also have the People's Choice, which adds in a fifth player, which can really be a deal breaker. The game does move relatively fast as long as the players know what they're doing. As they're spreading stuff throughout their museum or as they're trying to look from one side of the table to the other, that's the only thing that kind of slows the game down. As far as the board and everything, it's big for just a card game. So when you're trying to see everything that's there, especially for people who may not have the best eyesight, it is a little difficult moving around and trying to see what's on the other side of the board. But I don't think it takes away from the gameplay. Ultimately, I really enjoy this game. I can't wait to try it with some more of the expansions and to try it with a 5th player to see how if that works or if it slows the game down. As far as the new players, once again, if they're not gamers, leave out those headline cards, leave out the expert board, bring them in later, and then they'll probably have a better first experience at the table with you. If you have any questions about the game, leave them in the comments below. I'll get to them as soon as I can and try to be as thorough as I can as well. If you have any feedback for me, that's welcome. This is the first board game review that I've ever done. It's just a hobby that I love, and I have a decent-sized collection, so I want to go through and start doing some teaches and playthroughs on YouTube for the games that I currently have. Other than that, thank you for sticking with me. I know this video has been long, but I really appreciate it. If you like what I'm doing, click the subscribe button. I'm going to try to put out videos as often as I can, and then we'll see you next time. So thank you for joining me today on Gaming While Bearded.